The sun hammered down, relentlessly, a physical weight on my shoulders. Another day, another stretch of cracked earth, another layer of dust coating everything. This wasn't just a drought anymore. It was the slow, deliberate draining of the world. Weeks blended into months, marked only by the dwindling supply lines and the increasing pallor of the faces around me. People were drying out. That's the only way I could put it. I'm Dr. Elena Chavez, geologist. Well, I was a geologist. Now I felt more like a glorified diviner chasing whispers of water across a dead land. My team, what was left of it, looked just as done as I felt. Jake, the youngest, a kid barely out of his teens, but with eyes that had seen too much, was wrestling with a faulty pump hose. Sweat plastered his sparse hair to his forehead. "Any luck, Jake?" I called out, my voice raspy from the dust and the sheer effort of existing. He shook his head, then managed a weak grin. "Almost, Doc, just this last bit. Then we'll see if those seismic readings of yours mean anything." They had to mean something. We were running on fumes, on hope that was thinner than the air. The community, our makeshift settlement 100 clicks back, needed water yesterday. They were counting on me. My family was counting on me. If there was a source, any source, I had to find it. Then, the ground gave way. Not a tremor, not an earthquake, just a collapse. A section of the ancient riverbed, dry for a decade, simply caved in, sucking down a few meters of our equipment before we could react. For a moment, my heart stopped. Another failure, another dead end. But then, a faint glint, a shimmer of something impossibly blue caught the light filtering down into the new chasm. We had found it, a sinkhole, a massive one, leading down into what looked like an underground cathedral. And at the bottom, unbelievably, an oasis, a lake, deep, still, reflecting the weak light we cast down there. It was too much, too perfect. Setting up the main pump took another agonizing day. The air down there was heavy, cooler than the surface, carrying a faint, strange smell. Not mold, not earth, something else. Like clean metal and damp, dense earth, mixed with something I couldn't place. Sweet, too, almost. Jake was the first to get a cup from the initial trickle. He gulped it down, his eyes wide. "How is it, Jake?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. My own throat was sandpaper. He wiped his mouth with the back of his hand, a giddy, almost feverish grin spreading across his face. "Sweet, unbelievably sweet, Doctor. Sweeter than anything I've ever tasted. Probably just because I'm about to shrivel up and die of thirst, you know?" He laughed, a short, breathless sound. "This is it. This is what we've been looking for." I took the cup he offered, a small plastic one, worn smooth. The water was cool, but not cold. It didn't feel like typical underground water. It had a faint, almost oily luminescence to it, a subtle inner glow that danced as I swirled it. And the taste, he was right, sweet, not like sugar, more like a deep, earthy sweetness with that strange metallic tang underneath. It was unsettling. My brow furrowed. Sweet, not normal for groundwater. I remembered thinking that, but dismissed it. The heat, the fatigue, the sheer desperation. I had been hoping for water for so long, I couldn't allow myself to be picky. We had found it. That was all that mattered. A few days later, the water was flowing into the makeshift settlement. People were celebrating. It was a carnival of hydration. Children splashed in communal troughs, faces beaming. For the first time in what felt like forever, the sound of laughter echoed through the camp. I watched them, a heavy mix of relief and exhaustion washing over me. We had done it. But then, the quiet reports started drifting in. Nothing alarming at first, just oddities. Dr. Ann, our head medic, a woman whose calm demeanor usually kept the camp from dissolving into panic, called me over the comms, her voice a little too tight. "Elena, I've got a few patients with charts that are a bit off. Nothing critical, you understand, but their heart rates a little fast, not racing, just consistently elevated. And their sleep patterns, deep, profoundly deep, almost comatose, really. But they wake up feeling completely refreshed, energized even." "Synchronized?" I asked, my voice flat. I was tired.
"You think it's the new water?" "Just a passing thought," Anne replied. "It's just that there's a certain synchronicity to it, and the dreams they're reporting, vivid, very vivid, about currents, deep underground flows, ancient rivers, and this feeling, a sense of being watched, even when they're alone." Feeling watched? I tightened my grip on the glass of water I'd just poured from the tap, the new tap, fed directly from the oasis. The water was warmer than it should have been, and that faint oily sheen was a little more pronounced. Psychological pressure from the drought, I told myself. That's all it is. People are stressed. I took a sip. That sweetness again, and that faint, indescribable odor that now seemed to cling to the air around the water source. Then the changes began to push past the subtle. They broke through my tired rationalizations like a fist through glass. I was checking the main pipeline, near a patch of brittle saguaros that had barely clung to life. Now they were transformed, bloated. Their stems were engorged, pulsing with grotesque green veins that looked like something peeled from an anatomical chart. The thorns were longer, twisted, almost undulating. It looked wrong, alien. "Unbelievable," I muttered, my voice barely audible. "This growth rate." A scream ripped through the air, sharp and desperate. "David, what are you doing?" I spun around. David, a quiet man who usually kept to himself, was grappling with another settler, his hands clenched around the man's throat. His eyes, usually a watery blue, now held a shade of deep, bottomless black, like obsidian. The other man choked out, "I was just making a joke." "Nobody touches our water." David's voice was deeper, resonating in a way that didn't sound like him. It was a guttural growl, full of an almost primal fury. A smell wafted over me, metallic and green, like ozone mixed with pond scum, but with that sickeningly sweet undercurrent. It was emanating from David and from the cactus. It permeated the air, thick and cloying. No, I thought, a cold dread twisting in my gut. Not dust, not drought. This is the thing. This isn't revival. This is something else. Anne's voice crackled over the comms again, a panicked tremor now apparent. 3 altercations in under an hour, and the dreams, they're not dreaming anymore, Elena. They're hearing it, the call, from under the ground, from the water. I stood in front of a small potted seedling, one a botanist in our team had been diligently watering with the new supply. Its leaves were turning a silvery hue, twisting and curling like fine filaments. I looked at the stream of water flowing from a nearby tap, shimmering under the weak artificial light. It wasn't perfectly clear. Something was swirling in it, a subtle, almost imperceptible current within the current. The flow, it's not just water, I thought, my mind racing, trying to catch up with the creeping horror. It's a living medium, a kind of liquid consciousness. It's changing everything, and this is just the beginning. I went back to my tent, the canvas flapping gently in the dry wind. My head was pounding, but not from thirst or fatigue now. It was a rhythm, a pulse, a faint thrumming that seemed to echo Anne's words, the call, from under the ground, from the water. I stood over my wash basin, a plastic bowl filled with the oasis water. I splashed it over my face, the coolness a temporary reprieve from the internal fire. My hands, I looked at them. The skin seemed softer, almost translucent, and the blue veins underneath, they seemed to glow a little brighter. I lifted a hand to my nose, and I smelled it, that distinct odor. Metallic, ozone, pond scum, the smell of the water, the smell of David, the smell of those deformed cactuses. It was coming from me. It's here. My internal monologue started, my voice in my head detached, almost without feeling. With me. My hands looked almost translucent under the dim light of the tent. Blue veins, like tiny rivers, traced themselves across my skin. I touched my neck, where my pulse beat, a slightly faster rhythm than normal, that quickened heartbeat Anne mentioned. And the smell of pond scum, metal, it was coming from me. It's here. My internal monologue started, my voice in my head detached, almost without feeling. With me. My hands looked almost translucent under the dim light of the tent. Blue veins, like tiny rivers, traced themselves across my skin. I touched my neck, where my pulse beat, a slightly faster rhythm than normal, that quickened heartbeat Anne mentioned. And the smell of pond scum, metal, it was coming from me. I gently touched my lips, feeling the lingering, haunting sweetness. It's here, with me. I had to go back. My equipment lay scattered, mostly ready. My rebreather, the thick wetsuit. I couldn't just stand by.
This isn't natural, I kept telling myself, my hand automatically reaching for the diving gear. My scientific brain was screaming for answers, even as my gut recoiled from the implications. I had to know the source. I had to go deeper. The water was a thick cloak around me as I descended back into the sinkhole. My dive lights cut through the gloom, illuminating strange algal growths that pulsed with a faint, sickly green light. Columns of rock, craggy and ancient, loomed as I went deeper. The oasis below was a maw, a vast underwater cavern whose true depths had been hidden for millennia. Then I saw it. At the very bottom, sprawling across an area bigger than any structure I'd ever seen, was a colossal organic mass. It was a network, twisting and writhing, like roots, veins, or perhaps some kind of nervous system. It pulsed with a dull, incomprehensible luminescence, growing out of a gel-like substance that shimmered with an inner light. It was still, but it was breathing. A slow, rhythmic expansion and contraction of the entire grotesque mass. As I neared, my senses exploded. Not in my ears, not in my eyes. Straight into my mind. Vague images flashed, ancient, deep. And sounds. A low, resonant hum, a mournful wail from eons past, reverberated directly into my consciousness. It wasn't sound through water. It was in my head. I shone my powerful dive light onto the structure. It can't be rock. It's alive. The thought formed in my head. And instantly, a faint echo of that very thought reverberated back, slower, deeper. Alive. I tried to speak, my voice muffled by the rebreather. What is this? 2 seconds later, my own voice echoed back, not through the water's acoustics, but in my head. Distorted.
and with it a tiny, almost subliminal hiss, like a reply. The entity was talking back to me, using my own voice, or perhaps consuming and reflecting my words. The water around me rippled up, a gentle vortex, not from a current, but from what felt like a deliberate movement. A chilling cold seeped into my bones. I kicked hard, propelling myself upwards, my heart slamming against my ribs. I glanced back one last time. Through the murky water, the faint, flickering light from the depths revealed something impossible. The currents themselves seemed to rearrange, stretching and contorting into something that resembled a hand, or a tendril. It was slowly reaching, rising towards me. Not a natural current. It was an invitation, or a grasp. It wasn't mindless. It noticed me. It knows I am here, I thought in a desperate internal scream. And instantly, a cold shiver ran up my spine, as a thought, not my own, crystal clear, echoed in my mind. Yes, Elena, we know. I activated my thrusters, slamming the controls to full power, rocketing towards the surface, leaving the ancient, slowly awakening consciousness beneath. I burst up from the water, or what I thought was water, gasping. The air in the sinkhole felt heavy, thick, somehow older. My rebreather had done its job, but my lungs burned anyway. My body, every single cell, screamed at me to get out, to climb, to run. And that voice, yes, Elena, we know. It echoed, not in my ears, but inside my skull, vibrating against my teeth. I scrambled up the slick, rough rocks, my hands shaking. The ascent felt longer, the air growing hotter with every meter I gained. When I finally dragged myself over the edge of the chasm, blinking into the harsh, red-tinged daylight, the dust no longer felt like dust. It felt like ash. I had to tell someone, anyone. Dr. Ann was at the main water pump, checking the pressure gauges with her usual calm efficiency, or what used to be her calm efficiency. Her movements seemed a little too fluid now, almost graceful, like something stretched. Ann! I stumbled toward her, my dive suit still dripping, leaving dark trails on the cracked earth. You wouldn't believe what I saw down there. It's not just water. It's alive. A living thing, a colossal organic mass at the bottom. And the water, it's part of it. My voice sounded alien to my own ears, hoarse, frantic. Anne turned, a polite, almost empty smile on her face. Her eyes behind her usual glasses were wider than I remembered. The pupils seemed to drink in the light. "Elena," she said, her voice soft, oddly soothing, just a little too soft. "You sound terribly tired. That dive must have been quite demanding. You're seeing things, that's all."
The heat, the stress, it does strange things to the mind. She looked around then, briefly, at a few other settlers who had paused their work to glance at me. They offered similar, unsettlingly gentle smiles. Too many teeth. Their eyes, all of them, seemed to share that same wide, dark look, like obsidian discs reflecting the sun. I tried again. "No, Anne, you don't understand. I saw it. It's pulsing. It's sending out thoughts. It spoke to me in my head. And the water, it's not clean water. It's modifying us. Look at these cacti near the intake pipe. They're bulging. They're throbbing." Anne just took my arm,
her grip firm, yet strangely cool. "Elena, the water is helping us. We can finally grow food. People are healthier, more energetic. You're just overthinking. Let's get you some rest. And maybe a fresh cup of water. It's quite sweet, you know." She smiled again, a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. Those eyes, they didn't blink often enough. I pulled my arm away. Her skin felt slightly rough, like wood, but still cool. Her eyes, the pupils were wider, and her skin looked stretched, taut. Did no one else see it? Was I the only one who saw this? I mumbled to myself, my own thoughts racing, questioning everything. My vision felt a little blurry at the edges, or maybe the world was blurring. I left Anne there, standing by the pump, watching the water flow with something close to devotion. That strange, almost metallic ozone smell clung to the air and to everyone who stood near the water. It was on her, I knew, and it was on me too. I still felt that faint itching, that awareness under my skin. I walked towards the makeshift living quarters, past the tents. The clay walls of a few tents nearest the water pipe had changed. Dark green streaks, almost like thick, raised veins, ran across the sun-baked earth, fading into a reddish-brown around the edges. I reached out and touched one. It was damp, squishy, soft like raw meat. My fingers recoiled. A faint shiver ran up my arm. Maria lived in one of these tents. Maria, our resident artist, used to paint small, cheerful pictures of desert creatures. Now, the canvas propped outside her tent was covered in swirling, abstract forms, twisted lines, coiling shapes, and dozens of eyes. Black, no pupils, just dark, gaping holes. I found her inside, sitting cross-legged on the dirt floor, staring blankly at the far wall. She hadn't bothered with the fan. The air in her tent was thick with that sweet, metallic smell. Her lips were dry and cracked, but not from thirst. They were crusty with something else, something I didn't want to think about. A small puddle of water had condensed on a wooden table beside her, and every few minutes she'd lean over, slowly, and lick a drop from the surface. She wasn't eating. She wasn't drinking from the commune well. Only these condensed drops. She was whispering, mumbling, clusters of sounds I couldn't make out, but they seemed rhythmic, like waves breaking or a pulse. "Maria," I reached out, gently touching her shoulder. Her skin under my fingers was hot, and it felt rough, like bark that had started to peel. Not human. It felt like the outside of a dry, rotting log. Her head snapped up. Her eyes were like the ones in her paintings, wide open, black, no pupils. And her mouth was open too wide, stuck in a gaping expression. It wasn't a face I knew. "Maria, what are you thinking?" I whispered, trying to sound calm, but my stomach was churning. And then it hit me, a flash, like a sudden electric jolt directly into my brain. An image, not a picture, more like a feeling, a memory that wasn't mine. A vibrant, deep blue current sweeping through endless darkness. Ancient currents moving, flowing. I pulled my hand back as if burned. That wasn't Maria's thought. That wasn't a memory. It was shared. A connection. Just for a second, but it was there. My blood felt cold. It's in her head, and it almost got into mine. I stumbled back outside, my breath coming in short, ragged gasps. I had to warn them, all of them, before whatever was happening here, before it was too late.
I saw the main square, where people often gathered for news, for supplies. I ran towards it, the grit in my mouth suddenly tasting like iron. I grabbed the emergency comms mic, its plastic rough under my clammy fingers. I could see the faces in the small crowd already gathering. All were looking at me.
Some with mild curiosity, some with that same unsettling, slack smile. The smell here was stronger. Ozone, metal, something sickeningly sweet. "Everyone!" My voice cracked through the loudspeaker, echoing across the dusty ground. "The water! The new water! It's changing all of us! It's a living thing, a real entity beneath the ground!" A ripple went through the crowd, murmurs, not of alarm, but of irritation. A few people shook their heads, their hair matted, eyes wide. Some laughed, a dry, rasping sound. I saw Jake then, the young man who was the first to drink. He was standing near the front, talking to a friend. "Poor Elena," I heard him say, his voice pitched just a little too high, a little too saccharine. But then, as if by some terrible twisted magic, another Jake stepped out from behind a line of sun-faded crates. This Jake, his face was paler than I remembered, his skin streaked with faint, shimmering green lines, like moss growing on rock. His eyes, they visibly bulged, black and glassy. And that grin, it was too wide, stretching from ear to ear, pulling at the corners of his mouth. He held a bucket, not of clean water, but of the oasis water, shimmering with that faint, oily luminescence. He walked towards the wooden platform where withered flowers stood in pots, flowers that had been dead for weeks. He poured the water onto them. The flowers didn't just rehydrate, they writhed, they twisted. Thick green stems bulged and elongated, curling up from the soil like bony fingers, stretching directly towards me, waving, reaching. Each filament tipped with a droplet of that glowing liquid. I stepped back, my heart hammering against my ribs, a raw, painful thump. "Jake," I stammered, "there are 2 of you?" The second Jake, the one with the bulging eyes and green streaks, simply nodded. His grin remained, fixed, unnatural. And his teeth? They were longer, sharper, just a little. I instinctively raised my tactical flashlight, a powerful beam I used in the caves, and shone it directly into his face. He didn't flinch. He just opened his eyes wider and wider. The light didn't illuminate him. No. Instead, the shadows around him seemed to deepen, to grow, to absorb the light. It was like staring into a bottomless well that was actively drinking in the brightness. The darkness around him felt heavy, like a physical presence. My whole body began to tremble, my hands, my knees, my arms. "This isn't Jake," I whispered, almost to myself. "What in God's name? What is this?" I didn't expect an answer. I didn't want one. I knew, deep down, that the answer was worse than any question. Then they started coming out of the ground. Not from the sinkhole itself, not yet, but around the edge of it, where the earth had caved in days ago. Colossal structures, not rock, not metal. They were green-black, like diseased flesh, thick and segmented, slowly, agonizingly, pushing their way up from the broken crust of the earth. They looked like giant pillars of muscle and vein, reaching for the bruised orange sky. A cold, flickering light emanated from them, a pale green pulse.
Each time one of these flesh columns pulsed, I saw new, faint blue veins appear on the faces and hands of the people in the crowd, like a shared, synchronized heartbeat. It was here. It was rising, and it was in all of us. I looked at my own hands. The blue veins, usually just a faint network, were now stark. Against my sun-parched skin, they seemed to glow with a dull inner light, just like on the others. A thirst, deep and insistent, welled up in me. Not the dry, rasping thirst of the desert. This was different. This was alluring, a promise. I looked back at the crowd. They weren't people anymore, not in the way I understood people. They were puppets, branches swaying to a single unseen will. Their faces, all of them, fixed in that same wide, vacant grin. Their eyes black, every single one of them. "No one's listening," I mumbled, the words feeling heavy and hollow in my mouth. Did I even say them? I wasn't sure. I was one of them, wasn't I? But a part of me, a small, desperate ember, still fought. I tried to pull away from the square. I have to destroy it, I thought, the words a desperate command to myself. My head throbbed. As I thought it, the veins on my hands throbbed too, a sharp, painful ache.
A voice, not my own, but so chillingly familiar, so much like my own inner voice, echoed in my mind. Why resist, Elena? We are one, the same flow, the same purpose. I looked down at my feet. A thin stream of water, clear and glittering like liquid gold, was seeping from the parched earth. It wound its way towards me, drawing a line in the dust. I knew. It wasn't just trying to take my body. It wanted my mind, my will. It was attacking my thoughts. A strange calm started to settle over me. A feeling of deep, profound weariness. To just let go. To merge with the flow. To not fight anymore. It would be so easy, so simple. The thirst became a craving, a whisper that promised total understanding. I almost reached for the water at my feet. Almost. But then the thought of Jake, the real Jake, the one who gulped down the first cup, flashed in my mind. The one who had believed in me. No, I couldn't, not yet. I turned and ran, not towards the settlement, not towards Anne, but back to the sinkhole. I had to get there. I had a plan, a desperate one, a last resort. Days ago, when we had set up the main pump, I'd stashed a small cache of explosives, just in case of a rockfall, a dangerous blockage. Now, it was for something else, something far worse. The mutated crowd was behind me. They didn't run like people. They moved with a disturbing, fluid grace. They crawled, slid, their limbs elongating, stretching out like roots tearing through soil, propelling them forward with terrifying speed. Their hands, already gnarled, twisted into claw-like tendrils that scraped against the dry earth. Their black eyes were fixed on me. And the grins were wider now, pulling at their skin, almost tearing their faces apart. I reached the edge of the sinkhole, scrambling down to the platform where the main pump machinery hissed. I worked frantically, hands fumbling, adrenaline burning through me. I pulled out the satchels of explosives, quickly attaching the detonators,
setting them around the most vulnerable points of the rock face, near the water intake. Just as I activated the timer, a massive shadow fell over me. I looked up. One of those immense green-black flesh columns had fully emerged from the chasm. It moved like a slow, ponderous snake, undulating, its tip reaching. It was reaching for me. A tendril, thicker than my body, uncoiled from its base, coming for me. My radio crackled, my own voice, but deeper, softer, almost a purr. Elena, don't do it. Join us. Feel the unity. Behind me, the transformed crowd had stopped. They stood at the edge of the chasm, silent, all of them, and every single one of them stared at me with that same wide ear-to-ear grin, their black eyes glinting in the faint light. The grin reached from one side of their faces to the other, stretching their mouths impossibly wide, almost ripping the corners. Tears welled in my eyes, not from fear, not any more, but from a raw, aching despair. I had lost them, all of them. They were gone. The people I knew, the friends, the community, all gone, swallowed by this thing. The trees around the sinkhole, the ones that had stubbornly held on to life, suddenly writhed. Their branches twisted, leaves fluttered. They detached from the branches, but didn't fall to the ground. They hung in the air for a moment, then spun, contorted into impossible shapes, and simply vanished, dissipating into the thin air. The countdown hit 0. There was no deafening roar, no thunderous boom, only a strange, almost absolute silence. It swallowed the sound. A quiet, deep thrum vibrated through the earth, directly into my chest. The world around me blurred. The edges of everything seemed to melt, colors draining, fading, as if the entire landscape was a painting slowly dissolving in water. Something hit me. Not an explosion, more like a ripple, a shock wave of pure presence. Then everything went dark. I woke up, or seemed to wake up, in a world that felt both familiar and utterly alien. My body was sore, battered, bruised, but I was alive. I wasn't sure how. The sinkhole was gone, filled by tons of rubble. My explosives had worked, in a way. The silence that had swallowed the sound of the blast, that silence lingered in my ears, echoing in the quiet moments. I don't remember much of the journey back. Just walking, day after day, under a sun that didn't feel warm anymore.
Eventually, I found my way to some outpost, then a transport heading east, away, as far as I could get. Months passed. The world outside the desert was unchanged. People went about their lives, fought over politics, argued about the weather. They didn't know. They couldn't know. One morning, I was sitting in a crowded diner in a city thousands of miles from that place. The clatter of plates, the murmur of conversations, it all felt distant, fake. I nursed a glass of water. Everyone around me was laughing, talking. A young woman across from me, bright-eyed, was on the phone, giggling. "What a beautiful day," she said, her voice light and clear. "So warm."
I looked out the window of the diner. Rain. It was raining. Droplets slid down the glass, turning the city outside into a blurry, gray landscape. It had been raining for hours. I tightened my grip on the glass. The water. That taste again. Sweet. So sweet. That horrifyingly familiar sweetness. I looked into the glass. A tiny streak of water, a dark line, was slowly crawling up the inside, climbing the glass. It moved on its own. It looked like an eye, slowly opening, watching me. I knew. It hadn't stopped. It was still here. It had been in all of us. It was in all of them. They just hadn't realized they were no longer free. And I was the only one who saw the